Welcome to the Life Success and Legacy Podcast. We're glad you're here, and we hope you enjoy the episode.
Hey, everybody, we want to welcome you back to our next episode of the Life Success Legacy Podcast. I am joined by a whole bunch of Mikes. I'm Chris Bay. We got Mike Kwong down in Houston. We've got Michael Crawford here in Lawrence, America. And just south of Lawrence, we've got Michael King Everett. How are you, gentlemen?
Hey.
They're doing well.
Excellent. Everybody doing well?
Yes.
Super good.
Super good. Well, today we want to tackle the topic of what we see sometimes is a counterbalance to Nelson's teaching of think long term, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is sometimes we see people and we hear the phrase sometimes of don't get greedy in the context of IBC, right?
Yep.
So when we talk about, let's take it back to Nelson's teachings and thinking long-term and his principles, and then we can kind of share with people, where do we see places where people might have a little bit of a greed mindset or approach when thinking about IBC. Mike Everett, first of all, remind us of Nelson's principles, specifically unpacking kind of that think long-term.
Well, it is actually the very first principle. It's called think long term. And of course, anybody and everybody who's been to a webinar knows that we're going to hit on these 5 principles, then we're going to hit on them again, and then we're going to hit on them again.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking long term goes against everything that almost all of us have been taught about money. We've been taught, well, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but back in the day when people were getting anywhere from 10 to 12 to 15% on their quote unquote investments, we would think about it, we would see it, and we would get it. And I'm just telling you, when you're talking about IBC as a whole, that absolutely does not happen. So one of the things that Nelson then dovetailed on to think long term was capitalize your system generously. Mm-hmm. So if you're thinking long term and you're capitalizing your system generously, then you've got to think like a little bit more like a business owner. If a business owner is putting money into his business, and I don't care what it is, what is the normal time frame that a business owner might see a profit?
Oh yeah.
Well, Nelson
We
states
hear
in his
5-7 years.
5 to 7 years. I'm telling
Mm-hmm.
you. And that's, but you get, once again, you've got your people who are thinking about, golly, how can I make this thing work faster? And it really, truly does not go like that.
Well, I don't want to simplify it, but Nelson said it, we say it, there are no deals in life insurance. And I think, once we can wrap our brain around that simple concept, there are no deals. Mm-hmm. We are just taking a tool that is out there for us to use and applying Nelson's principles to get the most out of the money that we do have. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I can't tell you how many people I tell that to. There's no deals in life insurance.
It's probably the first thing I tell people.
MC, it was probably about 3 or 4 years ago when all of a sudden you came up with that, and I go, golly, that sounds good.
I mean, Nelson said it at some point, or somebody said it at the think tank in regards to a Nelson principle. I did not come up with it. I'm not that smart.
Probably Uric or Nethery, actually.
Maybe,
to be honest with you.
Absolutely.
Probably Nethery. He thinks like that a lot.
Oh yeah.
But I would also just add to it or balance that there's no deals in life insurance. On the same token, life insurance is a different animal altogether. When people think about money, right, they think about investments and things that they can kind of speculate with and maybe turn a buck with a profit, in something that may or may not, work out. But life insurance really is a contract, right? And that goes back to that whole idea of it being secure source of capital that you can, count on being there this year and certainly next year and the next. But here's the thing, because it's a contract and the way it's geared, it actually improves mathematically every year. So that's something really powerful. I mean, yeah, there's no deals in life insurance, but because it's a contract, because it's got these built-in guarantees, you don't need it to be, a deal.
I agree. I think your brain has to shift away from,
Oh boy.
from the idea of the investment and towards the idea of multiple uses out of your dollar and taking advantage of a tool that is a contract between you and that company. It is unlike anything else.
During the webinar, we always talk about a paradigm shift in their thinking. I'm telling you, it goes against everything that we believe about money. And of course, I usually start the webinars by letting people know that everything that we've believed about money and banking was based on a lie.
Yeah.
And when you start to think like that, then all of a sudden, you can almost feel the creaking going on in somebody's brain, because they're going, wait a second here, that's not what I got taught. And so if we can somehow shift away from all of that mess, then knowing full well that we're thinking long term, we're capitalizing this thing properly, and then we're utilizing the dollars in an efficient way, this thing just takes its own lane.
Well, and I'll also tangent on that with the idea that, people want this to go so fast, right? Mike, you just mentioned that, like, how can I make it go faster? Do we say the same thing about our 401k?
Oh,
I don't think people think like that. They put in as much as they can, sure, but they are aware that they can't touch it for 30, 40 years. And when they do, there's not only the taxes, but if they take it early, there's the penalties. So if we can't apply the long-term thinking to infinite banking, but we're willing to do it with something that's at risk all the time, that's the paradigm shift, right? Is we've got to get over that hump and get our brains on this long-term thinking, because once we treat it with that respect, it is amazing what can happen.
MC, that's on fire right there.
We just did an interview with one of our Nelson Nash Institute cohorts up in Canada, Winnie Lau, and she and her early 20s daughter, Imaja, have put together a book and a resource for parents teaching financial literacy and confidence for kids starting early, as soon as they can put sentences together, right? And that's what I think about when I think about long-term thinking. Obviously, I want to use it for myself, absolutely. But I know several of us here, we're thinking about kids and maybe even grandkids. Like, how do we build a system and education that can go long-term, right? Again, I'll reference a book, What Would the Rockefellers Do? If you're a legacy-minded person and you truly think long-term, that's a great book to get you started. So definitely, there's a reason Nelson said his very first principle was think long-term. And Mike Kwong, as you mentioned, it's a contract. Like it's life insurance, and I always say it is not sexy. I love the fact that it's not sexy.
Right?
It is foundational to everything we do and think about money, right?
Yeah.
But there's two schools of thought, at least two. There's probably more, but there's at least two schools of thought. There's people who kind of are the 401k mindset, where they're like, I don't really want to deal with it. I just want to have it drawn out of my paycheck if I'm a W-2 person. And I hope that there's something there at the end, but I really don't want to invest myself or my thinking process or anything into it. Then there's the other people that are uber focused on rates of return and financial freedom dates and investments and passive income and those kinds of things. And Mike Kwong, you get to work with a lot of those people, right?
Sure. Yeah.
When you talk about thinking long term with those people, Nelson's very first principle, do you find that is a challenge for some of those folks that come from it from that angle?
I mean, it depends. Yeah. Like when you get kind of caught up in cash flow, right? That's what which is a great thing to focus on, because we need to pay our bills monthly, day to day even. It's easy to kind of pigeonhole or get tunnel vision as far as that goes, to shorter and shorter term focus, and it's like losing sight of the forest for the trees. Did I say that right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's always this focus on that first year, right, of how the policy may be structured. How much can I get right there, right now, or within that first month, there's, guess what? There's another year coming after that, and then another 5 years, and then another 10 years. What about that? What is that going to look like? I don't care how tall your tree is that first year as a sapling. I'm worried about how your forest is growing, by that 10th year, right? So these folks, I always remind them, these are permanent contracts. It's like a marriage. This is not some fling, with some money. Man, once we go down this route, this is set for you, and you should respect it in the same, way. So yeah.
Good stuff. Yeah, we'll come back to that. I'm reminded when we sit in on our Monday strategies designs, and I'm going to come to you, Crawford, on this one, and Everett, you probably have some experiences on this as well. When we are working with clients at the very beginning and they come to us and they're like, man, I got a big chunk of money. I need to put it to work. I want to dump it all into a policy. And this kind of ties into that don't get greedy mindset, right? It's like, I got $100,000, right? Let's dump it all in. And Mike Kwong, what you just said earlier is like, yeah, that first premium deposit, but then there's a follow-up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's also the mech. We got to be respectful of that,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Crawford, how often do we see folks, want to dump a whole bunch of money in, and we kind of have to talk them off the ledge and help them think long term of how they're capitalizing and building these systems.
I think it's exciting when people like come to the table with like a fervor, or they're all like frothed up, they're invested, right? I think that's an exciting aspect as coaches. We want people to be as excited as we are about infinite banking. What I think is so powerful is that because we have a really cool tool with our software where we can show them that 8-year window through Inspiring Hope and Freedom, it really helps put into perspective those first several years of premium deposits, so that they understand maybe we don't put 100K in on the front end. Maybe we chunk that down and use some of it for the debt that you may have, so we can turn that wind current. But once we have an opportunity to show them with their numbers, I personally don't think we've had a real hard time talking them off of that ledge, because then they see they're excited and they're ready to see that plan. And even though the initial, shock of us saying, maybe you do a 20K, and then we take this and we strategically place the rest of that money throughout your system in the first several years or whatever it is, I think once they see their numbers on paper and they see that 8-year plan and they're going, wow, I don't have to start with 100K to still make this thing churn.
We have a number of people that do come to us and they don't have debt,
right?
But they've got some dollars over here on the ledge or over here in a bank account, where we've got to be systematic about it.
Oh yeah.
We have to say, wait. We can't put all $100,000 or $200,000 in this thing. Why don't we do this systematically, where we can flow it in, flow it out over here for living expenses or vacation or kids' education or whatever it is, but then have something available to either make policy loan repayments back through using their income, or for future premiums for years 2, 3, 4, and so on. So
well, I think Nelson's principle applies to us as coaches, right? Not just for those who are like us as clients, but like as coaches, we see $100,000 and we go, all right, let's roll, baby. But at the same time, we've got to think long term too, right?
Yeah.
Let's figure out, like you just said, Everett, the most strategic way to make that money work efficiently for the client. And I think that's what's so exciting for us as coaches on those Monday afternoon strategy sessions, is like we get to put a jigsaw puzzle together every week with different pieces. And it is completely a coin flip as to what's going to happen. And sometimes, it's really straightforward and simple. Sometimes we got to really ponder. And I think that that's what makes it, fun.
I'm gonna share a real life example. Um, we have a potential new client who came to me and said, in September and October, I'm going to have between $100,000 and $200,000, depending on what he does with some other things that he's got going on. And I said, well, let's go with the low number, because I want to be as conservative as possible. And when I started jumping into his plan through IHF, I said, why don't we just start with a $20,000 policy? The guy fell out of his chair. He said, I was just positive that you were going to flood load that entire $100,000 into policy premiums. I said, no. I said, what we need to make sure that we can do is we got to be able to pay down some debt that you've got, number one, but we've got to make sure that year two premiums are available when they come due. It's not if they come due, it's when they come due. And so we need to make sure that we're doing our due diligence. And I'm going back to what you just said, Mike Crawford. We have to think long term, and we have to be in this thing right alongside our clients, helping them see down the road just a little bit. We can see down the road because we've been doing it a minute.
Yeah.
But this is brand new. This is like that shiny new toy.
I
where
I think that's where Kwong actually lives right now. I think based on it's just working through a lot of the shiny object, but also helping people think that long term and seeing, that down the road progress. I think you were saying it earlier, Mike Kwong, that when you explain an illustration to a client, you really are not just talking about year 1 or 2. You're looking at 5, 10, 15 plus years down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And every illustration, every policy, right, will have these benchmarks, right, that people don't think about all the time. They're focused on that year 1. What does that structure give me right now?
Yeah.
But as soon as year 5 comes around, or, around that time, the policy gets net geared positively, is what I call that, right? Where as a function of dollars coming in, each dollar in is going to net you more than that dollar in growth, additional accumulated cash value growth that you could leverage and use, at your will as you need to, but only, gets better and better each year as well. So, there's this mentality sometimes where some folks get caught up in well, I got to make these premium payments for how long? 25 years. I mean, that seems like forever. But I always ask them too, well, okay, before that 25th year, let's say earlier on, and say even year 5, where every, $4 that comes into your, let's call it an ATM. You have an ATM where you have $4 that you can put in, and this ATM's kicking out a growth of 450 or 470. Would you like one of those machines?
I want 2 of them.
I would like 12 personally, right? And then it's okay, so when do you want to stop and turn off this ATM? Then they're like, wait, was that a trick question? Right? But it's the way you have to think about things, that really gets them. So,
but it takes a little bit to capitalize.
Sure.
But companies have gotten even better at working with Nelson Nash Institute practitioners to actually design policies so that they can function even more efficiently early on, where you don't have to mortgage the foundation, the engine of the policy, and you can still get really good access to cash value right away in the early years. So that's been really
more equity than you could imagine. I see banks right now promoting these 13-month CDs at 5%, but who controls the entire equation? How long do you have to let your money sit? What's the growth on that when you really consider the fact that you lost access to those dollars for the entire year, or 13 months? Yeah. And so I think it's so funny to really contemplate dollars and cents of that, where people are like, oh yeah, I just dropped it into a long-term CD for now because it's got really good rates of return. I'm like, yeah, but you don't get to use it. You're locked up now.
One use.
one use.
That's it. Yeah.
And then you get to pay capital gains on the growth.
Right.
You're so positive, Crawford.
This
Just
rosy
hammering.
outlook.
So much of it is a mindset shift, a paradigm shift. And early on, I really struggled with falling back into those ruts of old ways of thinking, you know, in the first several years of doing IBC personally, and questioning myself. Now, you know, a decade plus into using IBC, rarely do I fall back into that.
Well, I'm going to throw in principle number 5, rethink your thinking.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually a principle that Nelson added some years after he wrote his book.
Yeah.
And it was probably only actually given to the Nelson Nash Institute people maybe 6 years before his passing.
Yeah.
So keep in mind, he'd been utilizing IBC 15 years before he wrote his book. He wrote his book in 2000, and it was probably at best 2010, 2011 when he came up with principle 4 and 5, quit doing business with banks and rethink your thinking. So, you know, this is always kind of just new things, but using the old principles are always cropping up in us learning, but us being able to educate our clients at the level that we are trying to give them confidence and competence in what they do with their own IBC plan.
Yeah, so different ways that we personally have experienced kind of fallen into that greediness, right? Of wanting more out of IBC or out of our investments or whatever it is. You know, specific to IBC, we see sometimes greediness in the design of the policy or how they want to fund it up front, wanting to throw it all in. We're actually really bad life insurance salespeople, because we are constantly talking people off the ledge and doing smaller policies. I mean, we really are pretty bad at that, from your traditional perspective. Also, greedy sometimes, I think, in terms of the size of policy loans that people will take. Not that you can't take a max loan and utilize it, but that's where you really want to work with your coach so that you have some support, some background, some safety nets in place. Sometimes folks, man, they want to suck all that money out. And, you know, if you have one domino fall, they could be in a really bad position. And so there's that. So yeah, there's a variety of places that we see where people sometimes can get a little greedy and not have that thinking long term. Any other thoughts or comments around that idea of thinking long term, or places that you see folks get a little greedy?
Yeah, just to add to your point about, you know, abusing it, right? Abusing it. And I always tell them, you know, the way we build these policies, we structure it for the long haul. We build them ram tough, right, with the accumulation of the cash values. But just because we build it ram tough doesn't mean you want to drive it over a cliff that first year or whatever. Just to see. No. But yeah, that's, again, coaching is important, you know, and I always go back to that. Like, and I was a client of you guys, you know, in the beginning, just the same. And I know we all know like what it feels like to kind of be learning this, you know, figuring it out. And I can't tell you how much it helped us out learning, you know, with someone like you guys guiding us, you know, along and getting us started. So, yeah.
Well, I'll wrap up with this. And I think Crawford touched on this earlier, and I thought it was a really brilliant point. And that is, even from a coaching standpoint, we think long term. We even think of our business, if you're familiar with Good to Great and the hedgehog concept, One of those hedgehog concepts is, what is your profit per X, right? And for us, the way we kind of define that is it's profit per client. But some people think we're trying to squeeze as much profit out of our clients on that sell. And there's a different perspective on that. And it is thinking long term. Our thought process is profit per client over their family's generations. That is why we are fully invested in ongoing coaching with our clients at no cost. It is because our business runs on that ongoing relationship that we have with people, supporting them, supporting their kids, supporting their grandkids with their IBC systems. So I really love that about Life Success and Legacy. I think it's kind of our calling card is our coaching, our ongoing coaching that we do with our clients. And I mean, we're all clients as well. So we don't like the pushy, salesy stuff. We're not trying to squeeze as much juice out of the lemon in the first squeeze, right? This is a long-term relationship. It goes back to financial hope and freedom through long-term trusting relationships. That is what we're about. So,
well, you know, the name of our business is Life Success and Legacy. Not only are we doing that for our clients, but we're also thinking about that. Let's just say with these 4 guys that are on the call right now, we're thinking about our agency, not just for the next 3 or 4 years, but for the next 40 to 50 years. Why do we got a bunch of young guys on this thing now? Because we're growing this systematically. We're being smart about it. We're bringing on board in our company, and I'm just thinking about our company only, younger guys who are completely invested in IBC. It's pretty exciting for it's that's right. Well, I'm just using the guys that are here, but we have some other people that are behind the scenes that are part of the organization, but it's really exciting for the old guy that's probably going to be the first out to see that this will continue on when I step away.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Good stuff, guys. Thanks for chiming in on this. So to our listeners, we really encourage you to embrace the long-term thinking. This is a proven process. The breadcrumbs have been laid out for you. All you got to do is pick them up one at a time with the support of a coach, and we are here for that. Please check us out at lifesuccesslegacy.com. There's lots of information. You can go back to 2016 and listen to the original, very first foundational podcast back when we thought it was going to be a really stupid idea to start talking about this. And here we are in 2023, still talking.
Still talking.
Still talking.
Guys,
Guys, thanks for joining in on this. Good information to our listeners. Please join us again. We'll get our next podcast coming out to you. And we release about every 2 weeks. So hopefully that's a good amount of content for you. Thanks again for joining us. We'll catch you next time.